All right, what is up, good people? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach J.K. McLeod, and we're kicking off another Tuesday fitness-focused episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. If you're new to the podcast, that's what we typically do here on Tuesdays, is focus on something that has to do with fitness, nutrition. I say fitness and nutrition adjacent a lot of times. So I say that to say, if you do have a particular fitness-related question or an article, topic, study, anything like that that's come across your news feed and you'd be interested in getting my take, my perspective on that, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. I, for the most part, want to make sure that the content that I put out is something that is providing some level of impact to you, particularly if it simplifies and moves away from what I see as a growing amount of overcomplication in the fitness space. So before getting into today's topic, which is intended to be just a shorter episode where I'm answering a question that I recently took care of on a group call and wanted to bring to the podcast regarding how to shift into being a morning person, a person who works out in the morning. Before getting into that, I as always want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I know that you have plenty of other podcasts that you likely consume that are in your queue. So I truly never take it for granted and always want to make sure that I set apart time near the beginning of each and every episode to express gratitude and thank you for being here. I would also appreciate it even more if you made sure that you were subscribed to and or following the podcast, whatever language is used on the platform that you are listening on currently, or maybe you listen on multiple. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this. And full-ish disclosure, why I'm not sure that this is going to be a lengthy-ish episode. I'm not sure how long I'll hold up here is let's see here. It is Tuesday, so I'm a little more than 24 hours removed from dental surgery. So we'll kind of see how I'm doing here. And if I've got to cut it, I've just got to cut it. But let's go ahead and get into the episode here. So the question that was posed to me on a recent group coaching call was essentially, and I jotted this down just to try and remember the majority of how it was phrased, is I've recently changed roles at my job and my schedule is more unpredictable. I'm realizing that I need to switch to doing most of my workouts in the morning because counting on doing them after work has become unreliable. What are some tips you can give me to get more into working out in the morning? So far, I've just found it hard to get going, and I either hit snooze a bunch of times or I get up, but I end up being distracted and scrolling while drinking my morning coffee. So on the call that I was on, I did provide some tips, and that'll be included in what I jotted down for this particular episode. And I'll let you know, this is something that comes across my plate, whether it's with clients or in groups that I help out with, or just in chatting with folks out in the wild, IRL, in real life, because as we adults tend to take on more and more responsibilities, whether it be at home, at work, or some combination of the two, what we may find is that there are shifts that we need to make into our schedule to accommodate all of the different responsibilities we have. And this is actually very, very adjacent to an episode that's going to be coming out very shortly, a topic that Kelly and I did on the Lifting, Running, and Living podcast, where we talked about different ways that we've navigated figuring out how much was, adjusting my microphone, how much was enough when it came to working out and maintaining our fitness. And one of the things that we each shared were times where we early on had realized, okay, I'm probably going to have to make some adjustments because my schedule is changing, no longer accommodates working out at the same time or the same length or the same volume, things like that. So if you're interested, definitely tune into the episode that'll be coming out this Friday. I believe that's the 5th of December of the Lifting, Running, and Living podcast. So here are some things that I jotted down for advice if you were to ask me this question about being able to shift into being a morning person, a person who works out in the morning versus someone who primarily had done it in the evening. And a key factor here is having some sort of context into why this is happening. And in this particular instance, the person who had asked the question had taken on a newer role at work and realized that being able to count on working out after they were done, let's say it's a 9 to 5. And so they realized that being able to still consistently get into the gym at 5:30 or 6 p.m., as they had done and had been very consistent with, was becoming more and more unreliable because no longer were they able to count on being out of work at 5 p.m. There were times where certain responsibilities were going to keep them a bit later, and they just were losing motivation to still get to the gym after staying at work for an additional amount of time. And I think this is a real life thing that folks deal with. So I mention that because it's different than, say, for example, something that I've been asked before, where someone will say, hey, how do I switch into being a morning person? And when I say, well, first help me understand why you are looking to switch your workouts to the morning, excuse me, a response that I've gotten in the past is, well, I've just heard that that's better for you. And since I've heard that it's better for you, I feel like I should switch to that. And those are instances where we're going to deep dive a little bit more just to get an understanding of, is that true for you? Because just because you heard from somebody who seems to be same like age bracket, socioeconomic status, whatever, they've got 2 kids like you do, whatever the case may be, you see some similarities there, especially via social media. Just because you've heard that that worked well for that individual doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to work the best for you. At the end of the day, the best time for you to train, from my perspective, best time for you to train is going to be when you believe that you have the best chance of getting that training in with the most consistency and the most quality, some combination of those two things. It may not even be equal parts. It might not even be 50-50. So, all right, let's stop beating around the bush and get into it here. Okay. So the first thing that I would say is to treat your morning workouts as insurance versus treating them as an entire personality shift. So in a case where somebody is saying like, hey, how do I become a morning person, as opposed to I've typically been an evening person, I would challenge that you need to be a morning person. You simply are needing to become somebody who follows through on the promise to get your training done in the morning. So I think that starting off with this self-imposed pressure of believing that you have to become a completely different person right away and experience a major personality shift in order to follow through on the promise that you make to yourself to get your training done in the morning, it's just more pressure than is necessary. Could that eventually happen where you become a quote unquote morning person and you feel like you have more energy in the morning and you just feel super productive and you look forward to getting up in the morning? Yeah, that certainly could happen. And also, I don't necessarily, or I don't co-sign making that the expectation right off the bat. At the beginning, it's just, okay, the reason for this switch to morning workouts is because it's what I jotted down, like more of like an insurance policy. It's, I'm going to try and get this particular task done at the time where I believe I have the best chance of getting it done, versus I'm waiting until after work, where the likelihood, based on what I've realized about this new role that I'm taking on, this new schedule, I've realized that it's becoming harder and harder to follow through in that. So that would be number one, is to treat these workouts in the morning more as like your insurance policy versus the self-imposed pressure that you need to become a completely different person. Another thing that I jotted down here is to really focus on removing, or starting to strongly reduce, things that provide friction in the morning. So removing the early morning friction. And this has been a recent hot topic in my weekly emails and will continue to be. So if you're not already getting my weekly emails, just hit me up and I can add you to that list. I've actually got a little bit of a different shift for the month of December. You'll get a weekly workout. And then I'm also starting to give some really specific tips on designing your environment for being able to put you in a position to really complete the things that you say that you're going to do, your habits, the things that really pour into your fitness. And one of the things is really designing your environment so that you really remove a lot of friction. So in this particular case, things that potentially can put you in a position to make that transition a bit more seamless, a bit more smooth, so that you do follow through on what you said you were going to do, would be things like having your clothes ready to go. I have had clients in the past who, if they are training, let's say at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m., whatever the time may be, they will even sometimes sleep with their workout clothes on. They'll sleep in like shorts and a sports bra or something like that, because they just feel like it's easier for them to just roll out of bed and head to, their garage or the basement, or go to the gym if they're already dressed and ready to go. So they'll, wind down at the end of the night, take a shower at the end of the night, put on their workout clothes, and then hit the bed. Whatever works for you. There was a time frame for myself that I started laying out my clothes for my morning workout in the evening. And it was not specifically because I felt like that had me more ready. It was because I found that I was wasting a whole bunch of time. I don't know about a whole bunch of time. I was wasting, let's say, about 5 minutes or so, just kind of going through like, should I wear this t-shirt or that t-shirt? And, stuff like that. Like, I really found that I needed to reduce the level of decisions, or the number of decisions that I was making in the morning. So things like having your clothes ready, having your shoes already there and visible, and visible, not invisible, having your water bottle already filled and ready to go. If you're a coffee drinker, whatever you can do to prepare for that the day before, then let's go ahead and do that. The whole mindset here is to basically make the path to what you want to accomplish so obvious that you don't fall into this negotiation with yourself when you're already like half asleep to begin with. So that would be another tip that I've got for you. Another thing that I jotted down here is not to try and rely on some heroic level of willpower at, for example, like 5 o'clock in the morning. Your sleepy brain, I'll call it, is very good at negotiating and arguing the benefits of hitting the snooze button. So I strongly encourage you to set things up so there's nothing to really argue about. That could be things like moving your phone a bit further away from your nightstand, so you have to get up and go turn that particular phone off in order to get the day going, as opposed to you have the option to just roll over, press it, and then you're good to go. So that could be a thing, especially for my clients who have partners, whether it be husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever in between, or even pets. Sometimes there's a concern around waking other people up with this particular one. So I will straight up acknowledge that this one can be a little bit trickier. If you are somebody who's going to wake up at 4:30 a.m. and you've got a partner who doesn't need to be up until 6 a.m., that can lead to some negativity if your alarm is going like blaring for a minute or a minute and a half and it woke them up. So you may need to do some negotiation there. If you're somebody who wears a device on your wrist, then potentially using something like that. Like I wear a Garmin, and when I need to, there's the ability to set the alarm on that, so I can just have it vibrate and it's not waking my wife up if it's not one of the mornings that she's getting up earlier to go to the gym. So that one, I realize there's some negotiation that happens there. And also, I do definitely think that addressing the whole snooze button thing is a key component into being able to shift into getting up in the morning to go work out. All right. I just got a few more here that I jotted down. Another thing that I jotted down is to lower what I call the startup cost. So if you are transitioning from primarily doing your workouts in the evening to now doing your workouts in the morning, I want you to give yourself permission to start small, start tiny, start at the most foundational basic level. If you, let's say that you typically lift 3 times per week on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. This is just an example. Let's say you have a couple during the week and one on the weekend, and you are finding that based on your schedule, it would be more advantageous for you to get those Monday and Wednesday or weekday workouts in the morning. Then look at potentially doing an abbreviated version of those Monday and Wednesday workouts as you're shifting those to the morning, an abbreviated version of those. So start with the movements, the main movements, your big movements, like your compound movements like deadlift, your squat, your bench press, your overhead press, whatever it might be, your hip thrust. The big movements that you have, make sure that you're always keeping those front of mind in your program. However, if you normally have a program that takes you about an hour to an hour and a half to do in the evening, what sort of adjustments can you make to still get the most bang for your buck and shorten that into about a 40-minute program, 45 minutes maybe at the most, until you get a good solid rhythm built to be able to consistently get that in the morning. So definitely want to throw that out as an idea. And on the call that I was on, one of the suggestions that I made was understanding that somebody is going to have a fairly unpredictable schedule for 5 out of 7 days or 4 out of 7 days, then understanding that, yeah, you're going to keep that same consistency of 3 training sessions per week. Perhaps a couple of those sessions will be ones that you shorten just a bit until you are in a rhythm of consistently getting up and getting moving. However, that third workout that you do on Saturdays, when you have more time or you have more energy, whatever it may be, because you're not having to do the early morning wake up, then that one still do your full out. So just because you make an adjustment on a couple of workouts doesn't mean that you need to do that same thing on all 3 of them. All right, let's see. And then a couple other things that I jotted down is to really take a look at what your behaviors are in the morning that potentially could be slowing you down when it comes to transitioning from your wake up to getting prepared and then going into the workout. In this particular example, someone had mentioned, well, I can get up. However, I'm used to having my coffee in the morning. And then what happens is I sit down to drink my coffee and I have all intentions of working out, but then I get on my phone and I just find that I'm scrolling, and I would just rather do that than actually go work out. So a suggestion that I had was to really think about what are some things that right now are in your morning routine that perhaps you can try to find a happy medium, maybe shuffle how the order that those things are in. So if it's getting up and then you still want to scroll on your phone, you're walking for 5 minutes as part of your warm up. Say you're walking on the treadmill or you're riding the bike or the elliptical, you're doing those things for 5 minutes. That's where you're getting your music together. You're getting that playlist set. You're getting the audiobook picked. You're getting your podcast picked, whatever it might be, making sure that you are basically finding some sort of, like I said, a happy medium, kind of do a little bit of a remix or a mashup. And you do those things as you're preparing to train. Maybe instead of full cup of coffee, we go with half a cup of coffee. Excuse me. And that's while you're in the process of getting ready to go work out. So I know that from what I understand, I'm not a coffee drinker, by the way. So I know that the folks who've reported back who are like the coffee cartel, they're very much like, do not touch anything with my coffee routine. And also there are some times where you got to be realistic and understand that sometimes something's just got to give. So just keep that in mind. Let's see. And what else did I jot down? Give yourself some sort of a predictable cue that, like, this is the time where I start to move. This is when my training is now going to begin. It can be certain like mobility movements. It can be splashing like cold water on your face. It can be a particular song that you listen to, whatever it might be. It can even be taking a walk. Walking on the treadmill for 5 minutes could be the thing that just signals, okay, we are about to get into our workout mode. Something that becomes like a very predictable cue. Like when this song comes on, or when I pull a song from this artist. I'm really big into music. I use a lot of like musical cues for different things, or certain like musical vibes, in order to set the mood for what's about to happen. So those particular things can be something that really kind of flip the switch for you. So find something that's a particular cue, make a ritual out of that. And that signals like, okay, it's time to really get into training mode, and let me really focus on that. And I'd say just also this is another tip. Just expect that the first couple of weeks, even I'd say expect that the first month here is going to feel really awkward. Transitioning into a morning training is like it's a physiological adjustment. What really tends to feel really clunky and awkward and just really discombobulating at first tends to become automatic once you've been consistent with it, especially if you've taken some of the previous tips and strategies that I talked about, like adjusting your training a bit just for the first couple of weeks, laying your clothes out ahead of time. Those things I think can really help. And in the meantime, I just want you to understand it's going to feel awkward. It just is. The stories that you will hear from folks around, yeah, so here's what I did. Once I switched to morning workouts, I cannot believe how much more productive I feel. I cannot believe how much more energy I have and all this other stuff. 9.8 10 times out of 10, speaking from the experiences that I've had with working with people who've done this, that was something that happened after a certain period of time. It took a while for folks to get acclimated to that. I can think of one person very specifically who even had that feeling right off the bat after, I'd say, less than a week. Her feedback was, I just can't believe how much more productive I feel by getting up in the morning. And that was for the first week. And then, about 2-3 weeks later, she was like, this sucks. Like, this absolutely sucks. So basically, like that first spring of motivation and the endorphins that were just pumping with feeling good about getting up and getting it done, then real life really started to settle in. And that's where then the understanding around how fueling midday to prevent like those midday crashes come into play, how making sure that you're getting to bed at a reasonable hour, if at all possible, started to come into play. And that's actually a separate tip that I've got for you too. But just expect that even if you have that initial, like just rush of excitement and motivation, because you're like, yeah, I have gotten up super early in the morning for X number of days, that motivation is going to dip. Like, and it might even crash like super hard. And that's okay. We expect this to be a very bumpy ride because you are literally trying to install a completely different system. So it's going to take time to get acclimated to that. Think about a situation where you may work somewhere where if they decide that they are just going to completely overhaul the system that you use, whether it's a POS system, whether it's a CRM, whether it's any sort of a software system that you use, just picture that they decided they were switching everything up completely. It's almost like somebody going from an Android to an iPhone or the other way around. It's going to take you some time to really get an understanding of how to have this feel as seamless as your previous rhythm or system was. So give yourself time. That's another thing that I wanted to add, and this is kind of a bonus thing, and I'll pretty much leave you with this as the last tip. As you are transitioning, or if you're transitioning into doing more of your workouts in the morning versus having done them in the evening, become more dialed in with what your last meal and or snack of the day looks like. So for some context, for myself, I am typically up. It could be anywhere between like 3 to about 4-ish in the morning, because I just find that when I can get up and get moving in the morning, I can get a lot more done without the possibility of distraction. I'm not going to say interruption because I don't really face a ton of interruptions, so to speak, because my kids are both grown. We're a 2-parent household. We have there's a lot of assistance that I have in order to not necessarily have to drop everything at the drop of a hat and run to go grab a baby or anything like that. I remember days where that could be the case. However, that's not my current situation. So what I would say is it's more distractions that can creep in. That can be really easy for me. What I do find is if I'm up early in the morning between like 3 to 4, then I've got plenty of time to go at the pace that I want to go at to get the things done that I want to get done, including my training. So what I've found though is I don't necessarily know that I'm always all about trying to get food in that early in the morning. However, what can be helpful for me is I eat a pretty sizable dinner and really have kind of challenged myself. And this is maybe a tip for some folks. It works for me, may not work for you. What I've done is I've started to think about my last meal and or snack as my pre-workout meal for the next day. So for example, today is a Tuesday, so I'm recording and releasing this episode on a Tuesday, and I have, as long as recovery from this dental surgery continues to go as well as it feels like it's going right now, so far, fingers crossed, then I plan to work out Wednesday morning. So I plan to work out tomorrow morning. So I will take into account that whatever my last meal and or snack is tonight is most likely going to be my pre-workout meal for tomorrow. I may still have like a half scoop protein shake, maybe a little bit of fruit, something like that. I can't really chew on much right now, so it'll probably be half scoop protein shake before getting into my workout. So that's a little side tip for you, is to think about the last meal that you're having as potentially your pre-workout meal for the next day, especially for those of you who don't feel like you can handle a lot in your stomach or in your digestive system as you are trying to train, but know that you want to fuel it pretty well. And last but certainly not least, like, just remember that there is eventually a payoff to doing this, so transitioning into the morning workout. And again, this is not me telling you that you have to. I'm specifically speaking to the person who is saying like, hey, I'd really like to do this because of XYZ. So I believe that if you're able, let's manifest some positivity here. When you're able to follow through on getting that workout done before the rest of the world tends to wake up and wants to take chunks of your time, can really give you a sense of control and relief that really reinforces that particular habit. And most importantly, in my opinion, is you prove to yourself that you can follow through on the promises that you make to yourself to get this stuff done. All right. So I'm going to leave you with that. This ended up going a bit longer than I planned, which I say fairly often. However, I'm pretty stoked about that because, again, still in recovery mode here. So feeling pretty good about that. All right. If you found this episode to be helpful in any way, shape, or form, hit me up. Let me know. You can reach me on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod. That is MCLEOD. You can also email me, jk@jkmcleod.com. Again, McLeod is spelled MCLEOD as in David. If you've listened this long, I truly, truly appreciate you. Thank you again for listening and tuning into another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Take care, and we'll talk to you next time.